Yeah, please, yeah.
Thank you all for being here today. Today should have been a day of celebration. Today my parents, our family, and our loved ones should be celebrating Daniel's 39th birthday, laughing, hugging, sharing his favorite cake, talking about life, about future plans, and everything a son, a brother, an uncle deserves. But instead, Daniel is spending this birthday inside a prison cell in conditions that most people will never fully comprehend. Cold concrete, limited human contact. In reality, no innocent person should have to wake up for even a single day, let alone for 10 years. It changes everything when it becomes your family. It changes everything when you know in your heart someone you love is behind bars for crimes they did not commit. Today marks 10 years since the verdict that changed all of our lives. The day judgment was made. Not on truth, but on a story crafted to fit a narrative. A day where, in our view, the jury never received the full truth. Where testimony, investigative decisions, and forensic interpretations were presented in ways that misled them. A day where important facts were overlooked, where evidence was not handled as it should have been, and where the pursuit of justice was overshadowed by political pressure, assumptions, and the rush to convict due to the political climate to appease the community. This case wasn't built on facts. It was built on fear. It was built on assumptions, on inconsistencies, and on a narrative that was easier to believe than the truth. We're not here begging for special treatment. We are not here asking for favors. We are here asking for fairness, for transparency, for accountability, for a system that corrects its mistakes rather than burying them and keeping them sealed. Daniel deserves a new trial, a fair trial. He deserves a chance to stand before the world with the full evidence, not the version that was filtered, misrepresented, and suppressed. As Daniel has said from day one, if he were guilty of what he was charged with, he would want us to walk away. He has always said it would have been easier for him and all of us if that were the case, so that we could move on with our lives and forget him. But instead, he is begging the public to examine every piece of evidence. When a man is behind bars, begging the public to examine every piece of evidence, not hiding from scrutiny, but pleading for eyes on his case, that alone should make people pause. Just like the 46 Oklahoma families who fought to prove wrongful convictions before us and ultimately saw their loved ones exonerated, we stand firmly with Daniel. We know he is factually innocent of every single charge, and we hold unwavering faith that the truth will set him free. And today, on his 39th birthday, instead of a celebration, we stand here as his voice, as his family, and supported by thousands of people around the world who refuse to let the truth stay hidden. Happy birthday, Daniel. Now let me be clear. Oklahoma needs to hear what has been buried for far too long. In this case, we now have one accuser who admitted that Daniel never touched her. We have another who also admitted she had never even seen Daniel before trial. We have new information to share. The state's star witness, Jenny Holtzclaw, the woman who prosecution presented to the public as the grandma Daniel allegedly assaulted, has been documented asking, "Who is that?" When asked whether she recalls listening to audio recordings of interviews of Daniel Holtzclaw, she asked, "Who is that?" These are not rumors and these are not assumptions. These are video recorded statements, sworn testimony, and documented contradictions that Oklahomans have a right to know about. We know the accusers were offered a multitude of inducements, deals, and get-out-of-jail-free cards. Photo lineups were canceled out of fear that the lead accuser and others wouldn't be able to identify Daniel. Here's another shocking new revelation that should trouble every Oklahoman. Detective Kim Davis admitted in a sworn civil deposition that she didn't even know what exculpatory meant. Imagine what that means for every sex crime investigation this biased detective was part of for 30 years. Don't forget, Oklahoma City Police Department detectives Kim Davis and Rocky Gregory tipped off accusers that they were searching for a bad guy with lots of victims and that they were possibly sexually assaulted by an Oklahoma City police officer. The detectives went searching for women that would fit their narrative. I want the false narrative to stop. There was never the same MO that the detectives kept repeating. They ignored troubling discrepancies by unreliable accusers who described their assailant as black and short or dark-skinned or of dark color. Daniel received the most number of years, 62 years, for the accuser who said the officer that raped her was short and black. Daniel is neither short or black. Then there was Shardarian Hill, who at the end of her recorded interview with Detective Roger Gregory asked, "Is this good evidence? Even if you didn't rape nobody." After she just detailed a narrative of rape and assault in the emergency room, Detective Roger Gregory never included this information in his police report. While Daniel's appeal was pending, while he was fighting for his life, the Oklahoma City Police Department hit delete. They destroyed the entire email account of their star forensic analyst, Elaine Taylor. They destroyed the email account of lead detective Kim Davis. They said emails aren't evidence. What did the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals say about this egregious destruction of the email evidence? They shrugged and said this issue was moot. And it gets worse. When 6 respected forensic scientists, including the pioneer of modern DNA testing, knocked on the court's door asking to file a brief explaining the junk science used to convict Daniel, the court slammed the door in their faces. They refused to hear the independent scientists. Yet at the same time, the very same court stood by while Judge Henderson conducted secret ex parte hearings. Just the judge, prosecutor, and OCPD officials whispering in the dark to fix their mess. We know this because local news reporters here in Oklahoma City showed the surveillance tape of the hearings in June 2017. Daniel's appellate lawyer was never notified. He only found out when he saw it on TV, just like the rest of us. The court says it's all okay because Daniel's lawyers were eventually able to see the transcript. But you cannot call it fair when Daniel's lawyer were denied the most basic safeguard of justice, the right to cross-examine the witnesses against him. And they waited 8 years before finally allowing a DNA expert to look at those sealed records. 8 years of obstruction. They created a closed loop where only the state's voice mattered. Now let me ask you this. If Oklahoma City detectives in the highest court in the state were the reckless with their evidence, testimony, and truth in a case where the whole state was watching, what do you think they do when no one else is watching? Because if this is their standard under scrutiny, every Oklahoman should be concerned. I have gone through every emotion imaginable while living through this nightmare. Anger so deep, it shakes your bones. Bitterness that keeps you awake at night. And confusion that breaks your spirit, and despair that makes you wonder how much more one family can take. I have watched some of the people who accuse Daniel continue down paths of crime and violence, arrests for assaults, burglary, even attacks on law enforcement officers. I watched as charges came and went, as repeat offenders cycled through the system like a revolving door. And time after time, it felt like the consequences were light, minimized, or quietly dismissed. Yet Daniel, a first-time accused officer, was given 263 years. No violent history, no criminal past, no chance to rebuild, no evidence to put a man behind bars for 263 years. I witnessed something else that shook me deeply. After the conviction, some of these accusers attempted to follow through with their civil lawsuit. The case sold to the media as a follow-up victory, but when the truth hit the courtroom, all 11 claims were dismissed. Not one survived. I have watched the former district attorney's office fight harder to preserve a conviction than to pursue justice. I have watched repeat offenders walk out those same doors into, often with leniency or plea deals, while Daniel sits in a cell year after year. How does the system continually give second chances to those who offend again and again, yet deny even one opportunity for fairness to a man whose life was taken on allegations alone? How is that justice? We stand here today at the Oklahoma Judicial Complex for the same reason, because inside these walls are answers and secrets that Oklahoma has kept hidden for far too long. Information that the public deserves to see. Information that never reached the jury. Information about the forensic testimony that helped send Daniel to prison. And we know that because local media reported on it. The jury was led to believe that Elaine Taylor, the forensic analyst in Daniel's case, was credible, competent, and trustworthy. But the reality, a panel of 6 forensic experts reviewed Elaine Taylor's trial testimony and came to the conclusion that this conviction should be overturned and given a new trial. To top it off, the detective, Rocky Gregory, is the son-in-law of the forensic analyst Elaine Taylor herself, both working the same case. A conflict of interest that raised alarm bells in any fair system. It was never disclosed to the defense team. But nobody blinked, nobody paused, and nobody cared. Former prosecutor Galen Eager relied heavily on DNA to secure a conviction, knowing full well how powerful 3 letters, DNA, are in a courtroom. And his closing statements, he lied to the jurors, stating incorrectly where the DNA came from. And then something even more concerning. Elaine Taylor retired suddenly in February 2017. The same month, Daniel filed his direct appeal. Again, we know this because the local Oklahoma City media published this information. This came after Daniel's defense expert publicly dismantled her DNA interpretation and exposed major scientific errors in her testimony. So I ask, why the rush to leave the stand? Why retire immediately after her work was challenged under scrutiny? Why are the files surrounding her still difficult to access, sealed or buried in bureaucratic shadows? Because somewhere in that building are answers. Answer this state has chosen not to confront. Answer that could change everything. If the system is confident in its conviction, open the files. If the state stands by this verdict, and seal the records. Let Oklahoma see the truth. They're hiding much more than Elaine Taylor's work on the Daniels case. We know this because of the emails obtained during open records requests where former District Attorney David Prater asked the Assistant District Attorneys on Elaine's work in their cases. Families, defendants, attorneys, scientists, and everyday Oklahomans should be asking one question: why? What is being protected? What is being buried? And how many others have been HOLTZCLAW'd? Today we are announcing a new hotline, 1-833-OKC-TIPS, to encourage whistleblowers to report similar stories of prosecutorial, police, and judicial misconduct against their loved ones. If you've been impacted by false allegations, denied records, seen evidence mishandled, witnessed forensic issues involving forensic analyst Elaine Taylor or others, or misconduct by Detective Kim Davis, Rocky Gregory, or former Judge Henderson affected your case, we want to hear from you. Call 1-833-OKC-TIPS. Together we can continue to expose the corruption. Oklahoma has exonerated dozens, proof that wrongful convictions are not rare. They're reoccurring. And that means one thing: we need a conviction integrity unit now, not after one more innocent life is destroyed. This must step out of the dark ages and into the light of systematic, independent oversight. Justice demands it. The people demand it. We have a brand new website at freedanielholtzclaw.com that will feature newly discovered evidence, including never before seen internal government emails, open records responses, and civil depositions. It's time to end the secrets. It is time to end the silence. And today, 10 years after Daniel's imprisonment, while he fights for his life and dignity inside those walls, we turn our hearts and our plea to Attorney General Drummond. Sir, during your campaign, and again in a personal message to me in 2018, you said that if elected, you would review Daniel's case. You said you believed in transparency, accountability, and ethical governance. We believed you, and we are still waiting. Oklahoma cannot move forward until it confronts what happened in this case, and what continues to happen in others. We're asking you respectfully and urgently to honor your own words and open a full review into the Oklahoma City Police Department crime lab and the actions that led to this conviction. This is not just about Daniel. This is about restoring public trust. This is about accountability, and this is about the truth. Mr. Drummond, you have the power to bring sunlight into places where secrecy has lived for far too long. Use it. Do what you said you would do, and keep your promise. If forensic experts, legal professionals, and independent investigators are pointing out egregious errors by the Oklahoma City Police Department detectives, the forensic analysts, and even the prosecutor, doesn't that deserve your attention? And to the families watching, you are not alone. If you're fighting for someone behind those walls, please hear me. Do not give up. You are their voice. Sometimes you are their only voice they have. Keep fighting, keep knocking on doors, and even when they slam in your face. Gather transcripts, gather evidence, demand records, use social media, use your voice. Every step, every email, every share, every long night at the table builds momentum and gives your loved one hope. We are more than 10 years into this battle, and we're still standing. Because this fight is a marathon and it's not a sprint. And I believe with everything in me that we will meet Daniel at the finish line when he walks out of prison a free man. And when he does, I will not stop. And I promise you here today, I will fight for others who were targeted, silenced, or wrongfully convicted by the same machinery that took Daniel from our family. If you have information, if you've lived this nightmare, if you know someone who has, reach out. Call 1-833-OKC-TIPS. You will not be ignored. You will not be left behind. And to every supporter, donor, volunteer, and truth seeker, my family owes you a debt we can never repay. Thank you for standing with us, praying with us, shouting with us, and believing with us. And a very special thank you to our attorney, Ben Munda, for stepping forward with courage, commitment, and heart, and for taking up the baton in Daniel's post-conviction fight. With gratitude, hope, and determination, I now turn the microphone over to Ben. Great job.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben Munda. I have the honor and privilege of representing Daniel Holtzclaw. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I've been practicing law over 13 years and criminal law exclusively for the last 10. I became aware of this case very early in my career. I joined the Oklahoma County Public Defender's Office in fall of 2015, so this was the first major trial that I was able to observe because it took place just after I started. And if you weren't there at the time, it's very difficult to describe the atmosphere surrounding this case. It was a tense time in this country. Black Lives Matter protests were taking place throughout the country, including this city, Oklahoma City, and in relationship to this case, given the nature of the accusations. Now, I want to take you to the second floor of the Oklahoma County Courthouse. It was a madhouse. It had the atmosphere of a mob or a circus. It was standing room only. It was loud. It was raucous. There were cameras from local and national news media everywhere. It was a very chaotic scene, completely incompatible with the decorum and solemnness that I would expect from a courtroom. Not only that, but there were protests just outside of the courthouse, just outside the windows of where Daniel's trial was taking place, that were so loud, chanting, lock him up, that at times the trial had to be paused because the attorneys themselves couldn't hear the testimony of the witnesses. Now, at the time, I knew nothing about the case other than the general nature of the accusations, but even then, it always struck me as deeply unfair that a conviction could take place in that type of atmosphere. Additionally, this case gained interest to me because of, let's say, my adversarial relationship with Judge Timothy Henderson. During one of my later murder trials in 2021, Robert Hashagen, it came to light that Judge Henderson was having secret sexual relationships with some of the prosecutors from the district attorney's office, and more specifically, during the time period where Daniel's trial was taking place, and this case was taking place. So that always seemed deeply unfair to me as well, and so when the family reached out to me, I was very excited to take part in this case, and since then, having had the opportunity to get to know Daniel personally, I've had the opportunity to visit him in prison multiple times, and having the opportunity to read and review the thousands of pages of evidence in this case, I've become, thank you. I've become increasingly convinced, and am convinced, that not only did Daniel receive a deeply unfair trial, but that he is factually innocent. Now, it would be too lengthy to review the 20,000 plus pages of documents to go over each and everything that I feel like resulted in an unfair conviction for an innocent man, and I think Jenny did a great job, and I'm sure some of these other speakers will do a great job highlighting some of those things later. But one of the more recent developments which Jenny talked about, is on appeal, serious questions were raised concerning the integrity and validity of the DNA evidence in this case, what little there was. It was the only real physical evidence that allegedly tied Daniel to any of the accusers. And on appeal, it became apparent that there were serious problems with the work and the analyst in this case. And as a result, the Court of Criminal Appeals ordered a hearing to be held to discuss these matters, so it seems. And I remember this at the time. No one in the courthouse could understand how this could possibly take place without either Daniel or his attorney being present to contest the evidence or participate in any way. I still don't understand how that happened, and yet so it was. Yet for the first time in over the 10 years that this case has been pending, I, along with an expert, have been able to review those materials. Now, I want to be clear that those materials remain secret. They remain under seal. I am prohibited from discussing them publicly for now. I hope that changes eventually. What I can tell you is that I found all of these documents to be incredibly helpful for Daniel that will demonstrate how flawed his trial was and how innocent he is when those documents hopefully eventually become public. It's not just that, as Jenny said, there's been a ton of new evidence that was resulted in part from the open records requests we've done and also the civil discovery that took place during the lawsuit. And so all of that just goes back to my original point that all of the new evidence and all of the things I've seen reaffirm my conviction that not only did Daniel receive an unfair trial, but he was actually innocent. And we look forward to the day when we get to demonstrate that in court. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Get the whole mic up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I'd like to introduce Betsy Randolph, retired 25-year veteran of the Department of Public Safety and the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Again, Betsy Randolph. I'm retired from the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. I worked here in Northeast Oklahoma City for many years, here at the Capitol Building, in and around the Capitol Building and the Governor's Mansion. I'm a friend of Eric's. He and I have known each other for many, many years, 25, something like that. Went to a law enforcement school together, and I grew up in Enid. And so I know of him and his family, and when all of this happened, I was just so shocked. And then as I began to hear more about the case, I was just flabbergasted to hear, in my opinion, how railroaded and what a scapegoat that Daniel became. I believe he's innocent. I believe he was not given a fair trial. I think he had inadequate counsel, basically comatose counsel that did not even question or try to get any of the evidence suppressed. In fact, I think that's correct in saying that he just blanket said, "Go ahead. We'll take anything and everything that the prosecution says is evidence." Who does that? Then, not to mention, like as previously stated, the protests that were going on, they had not only Black Lives Matter, they had Black Panthers that were in the courtroom. How is that allowed to go on? How could that possibly be? If you've taken the time to look at Daniel's interview that he did, Daniel was not stupid. He is not stupid. He had been in law enforcement for 3 years. Both of his parents were in law enforcement. And so it's not like he had no concept when he was called in. It was not like he didn't understand what was happening, especially when they read him his rights. And at that point, if he were guilty, he knew all he had to do was just say, "I don't want to talk to you." And there wasn't anything they could have done. He could have got up and walked out right then. But he didn't have anything to hide because he was innocent. So not only that, but then he agreed to take the polygraph. He let them take all of his clothes. He answered all of their questions. He gave them a mouth swab. All of these things. Daniel would not have done that if he were guilty. I believe that in my heart. And I think he honestly thought that once they did their investigation, that they would find out that he was telling the truth. And so it really hurts my heart to think that he was treated so unfairly and that no one in this process, not to the everyday citizen, you and me. Look, watch that video. Over 2 hours I sat and watched that initial interview. And I left that so angry, so infuriated by the way that he was treated. But I also felt more and more convinced as I watched him, as I listened to him, of his innocence. And I for one, think that he deserves another trial, a retrial, and he needs to have effective counsel. He needs to have protesters that aren't being heard in the courtroom, protesters that aren't in the courtroom, and he needs to have jurors that aren't afraid, that aren't timid and being extorted, or that aren't being influenced by hearing protesters and afraid that they were going to have another Ferguson here in Oklahoma City. I understand why they would be afraid, but I don't think that, I think all of those things in conjunction with the fact that he was, like I said, just a scapegoat. Was there someone operating? Was there a police officer operating, doing these things? Possibly. Wasn't someone arrested after Daniel? Accused of some of the very same crimes? So those are some things that I think every Oklahoman, like Jenny said, every Oklahoman should care about this. Because the next person this could happen to is me, or you, or someone you love. And so that's my perspective on it. I appreciate your attention, and you're giving me an opportunity to say what I think and what I feel. I don't have anything to gain by telling you what I think. I worked in law enforcement almost 30 years, 27 total. And I've never heard of a law enforcement officer that willingly did all the things that that Daniel did if he was guilty. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Betsy. All right, now introduce Oklahoma's 19th District State Representative J.J. Humphrey.
Woo! I'm the only guy that has to pull that down when he talks. Hey, I just want to say that I am very, very proud to be here. I'm very proud to stand with this family and call out the corruption of our government, of our judicial system. Guys, it's not an accident that we're standing right in front of this building. It's the Justice Center for Oklahoma. And that's what we're calling out, is justice. That's what we want to talk about today, is real justice. And I just think about, as an investigator, so I have a little bit of experience, law enforcement, 35 years. I'm a decent investigator. And what you look for when you're an investigator, you look for patterns. You look for the same thing that happens again and again. So let's go back a few years and let's talk about Macy and Gilchrist and how they destroyed evidence and not just accidentally prosecuted misconduct. They intentionally, willfully, maliciously sent people to prison, sent people to the death row. They were known for that. And guess what? They spawned children. I don't know if y'all know that, but they spawned children. They created a whole group of prosecutors and judges who act just like them, carry out the same thing. Because you know why? Because there was no accountability. Those people were never held accountable. When your DA and your judges have sex together and they prosecute the people, do we need a law degree to know that that was wrong? Guess what? I tried to pass a bill. Me and Jason Lowe reached across the aisle to a Democrat. Me and him worked together to try to pass a bill to say, we called it the Henderson bill, by the way. We tried to pass a bill saying, you can't do this. It's wrong to have sex with the DA and prosecute the person that they're supposed to be prosecuting, and you're supposed to be making sure that they get justice. There's no justice. But guess what? How much accountability did we get in that case? None. If you went and you looked at Richard Glossop's case, we won in the U.S. Supreme Court. Now that case goes through the entire Oklahoma system. The entire Oklahoma system, where they found nothing wrong when we proved that they had purposely, willfully, intentionally destroyed 10 key pieces of evidence that would have set that guy free. He sat in prison 27 years. He sat on death row, called up 9 times, 3 times on the gurney, 2 seconds away from being killed. Only reason that man ain't dead is because they got the wrong medicine. Does it sound like justice when they destroy evidence on purpose? When they write in and tell the main witness, by the way, who was the one who killed the person, we know that, and they tell that witness, your testimony doesn't line up with the medical examiner. You know what that means? It means it's false, it's a lie. Your testimony doesn't line up. It would help our case if you would change your testimony. Guys, that's perjury. That's supporting perjury. It's criminal. It's witness tampering. And then they wrote over on the side, guess what? Here's what we'd like you to say. And he went in a courtroom and said that. Guys, we caught the other day the judges in Tremaine Wood's case where they were giving high fives to each other, talking about how congratulations, they got to withhold evidence. Guys, in Glossop's case, we caught them withholding evidence. We're catching them withholding evidence in all of these cases. And guess what? How much accountability? None. Why would they not withhold evidence? Why would they not cheat? Because they never get prosecuted. They never get anything. Jenny Drummond said he thought it was too old to prosecute in Richard Glossop's case, even though we got an outstanding verdict from the U.S. Supreme Court saying they did all of this. Guess what? The other day, Jenny Drummond was caught in Tremaine Wood's case having ex parte communications with Judge Lumpkin, who is on the appellate court that was looking at that death penalty case. Guys, I'm a moron, and I know they can't do that. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand the law like these guys. That's the top lawyer and the top judge in our country doing unethical, unexplainable. What's accountability? Have they been called up by the bar? Have they been called up by the judicial process? Guys, if you go up the road, we're fixing to file tomorrow a grand jury in Payne County where we're putting this entire court system on call on that grand jury. We're putting the judicial, every one of them, because every one of them have been told about acts like this, that it is their responsibility. These are the accountability people, and they are failing, and they get a big fat F, and we're going to call them into accountability. We're going to hold them accountability, and now it is time that they look into this case. Guys, why would anything be sealed? I don't understand this. We're supposed to have a fair and we're supposed to have a judicial system to where we can see, where the public can see what is going on. Why would you seal evidence? Why would you not have all this forensic evidence? Why would you not call into account the people who bastardize that process? It is time that we get our judicial system back. And I want to leave you with this. Guys, we see our country being torn apart. And the one thing that I work on, why I am so adamant about this, I don't care if you're Democrat or you're Republican. I don't care if you're female or male. I don't care what race you are. I don't care, because we all have one place when we have disagreements that we come to find justice. And that's our court system. And when our court system is corrupt, then we have to get that back. And so I'm not looking to Washington, D.C. I'm looking right here in Oklahoma. I'm asking Oklahoma to join with me, call out the corruption, get our court system back, because that's where we start on getting our state back. So thank y'all for coming, and I hope y'all support Nate.
Thank you so much, JJ. I want to pass it on to Tulsa Police Department Patrol Supervisor and Lieutenant Jason Angel.
I don't know if I can move. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that's my wallet. I need that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Angel, and I'm a 12-year veteran of the Tulsa Police Department, where I serve as a lieutenant supervising a squad of officers in one of our patrol divisions. And previously, I've worked as a patrol officer for 7 years, where I became a field trainer, training rookie officers, as well as a detective for 4 years. And I need to provide this disclaimer that I'm speaking on my own behalf and not on behalf of my department. I first remember seeing Daniel HOLTZCLAW'S case about 10 years ago now, and at first glance I thought Daniel was guilty and an embarrassment to law enforcement. Even though it was excessive compared to other sentencing that others get in the state of Oklahoma, his 263-year sentence didn't really disturb me, because I was so disturbed by the fact that he would use his badge to sexually assault women while on the job. What made this worse was that this was during a time of terrible turmoil for police officers in the nation. It was a daily occurrence to see negative police stories, and then to see also cities like Ferguson and Baltimore burning down and being destroyed by rioters who are angry at police actions. In most of these cases around the country, the facts didn't really matter to the media or to protesters, but the pressure for changes to be made caused some politicians and district attorneys to crumble under pressure and rush to charge officers with crimes. Like many officers, this nationwide anti-police narrative wore on me, especially as we saw a case in Northeast Oklahoma where an officer in my area was put through the ringer for a crime that she was later cleared of. But as I look back on it, I saw how the prosecution in that case lied to the jury, misrepresented police tactics and training to make the officers look bad and corrupt, and tried to blame the police, the people they relied on every day to testify against the people they prosecute, by claiming that they covered for the officer. Against this backdrop, I came across a video on YouTube by Michelle Malkin called Daniel in the Den, and it was a documentary about Daniel Holtzclaw, and I realized I wasn't really very familiar with the case. However, I assumed he was guilty, and I thought I would watch this and I would debunk the claims in the video, as I thought Michelle was probably just playing team politics like so many others were at that time. But as I watched the video, I had to rethink some of my previous bias in the case. I saw how Daniel's accuser had a sexual assault exam within 7 hours of the alleged assault, and there was no evidence to support the claim that there was sexual contact of any kind, which supported Daniel's claim. I wondered how there was ever how he was ever charged with the crime, let alone convicted, with this lack of evidence. And then I saw how detectives attempted to explain away just normal things like, why were there no fingerprints of the victim on Daniel's police car like she had described? And unfortunately, it was explained away by saying Daniel's car, they couldn't get fingerprints from the outside of Daniel's car because the inside of his car was so dirty. Things like this that just didn't make sense. I started to think there may have been something more to the case than I really thought at this point. But there were still other accusers, right? Well, when I saw that the other accusers were actually solicited by the same detectives, with Detective Kim Davis saying she and her partners looked through Daniel's records of women he performed records checks on while on the job. They found black women with drug and prostitution histories and contacted these women and their families, lying to them, saying things like, we have an anonymous tip that you were sexually assaulted by a police officer. When I saw this, I was floored, and every police officer I've talked to about this has the same reaction. Like, are you kidding me? This looked to me like the most biased, dishonest, and unjust investigation I had ever seen. In some cases, they even told a woman who was denied any wrongdoing that this was a bad officer with a lot of victims. She then became an accuser. Can you imagine a reporter going through arrest records at the county jail and asking only black inmates if they were mistreated by their HR records at a Fortune 500 company, going through the records of all female employees who were fired or denied a promotion, and asking them if they received sexual harassment from their male supervisors, asking if they would like to make a complaint, and telling them that there were a lot of others that came forward. Anyone with common sense can see where something like this might lead. I wondered, as I was watching this documentary and seeing some of these things, could this be deceptive editing, or trying to make a narrative for me? What did the sources who are sympathetic to these detectives say? I watched stories from sympathetic sources who thought these detectives were absolute heroes and geniuses who were incredible in their investigative techniques and procedures. And I saw them bragging about the same unethical and poor investigative tactics. One accuser was a black female who said the officer who raped her was a black male with darker skin than her and who was shorter than her. In her interview, she said that she would recognize the officer if she saw him again. If someone says to me as an investigator that they'll recognize the person if they see them again, this is a cue for me that it's probably a good idea I do a photo lineup. A photo lineup is where you take a series of photos, one of which you believe to be the person who was involved in the crime, and you're going to show this to a witness or to a victim. And the victim will tell you who they believe the suspect is, and will also tell you the degree of certainty, because we don't want this to be a guess. We want them to be certain that this is the person who committed the crime. If the suspect, for example, is a white male with red hair, I'm not going to show him a picture of a black male. That would be completely unfair. In Daniel's case, detectives would have made a photo lineup with Asian males who were in their mid-20s or early 30s. Why show that lineup to a person who said that a black cop assaulted her? Doesn't make any sense. And as we heard earlier, the district attorney's office and the police department conspired to say that they would not show any photo lineups to anyone because the only person they did show a photo lineup to early on in the investigation did not pick Daniel out of the lineup. And they said that they were afraid that people would not pick HOLTZCLAW out of the lineup, so they stopped showing photo lineups. Does that look like they were trying to find the right person or not? How did detectives square the situation? They said that it was a black male who assaulted her when Daniel is an Asian male. Well, one of the detectives in an interview after receiving mild pushback on this issue said, the police lights, they can make people a little disoriented. Now, first of all, anyone who's been around police lights knows that this is inaccurate. Also, this lady spent at least 10 minutes, supposedly, with Officer Holtzclaw. And so you would think that after 10 minutes, you would recognize that he's not black, but he's actually an Asian male. But that didn't stop the detectives from having an explanation. Every time there was something that contradicted the evidence, they had some other way of waving the hand and saying it's no big deal. I know it seems like that doesn't make any sense, but we're the experts here, and we have, and we'll tell you what to believe. That same accuser was the one that went to civil court and said she had never seen the person who, she had never seen Holtzclaw until the trial. So again, and Daniel was convicted on her charges and received over 60 years on her accusation alone. No evidence of a crime scene, no forensic evidence, no independent witnesses, no camera to corroborate, nothing to corroborate this claim whatsoever, yet somehow she was, the conviction still stood. Now how could this be possible? How could Daniel, in some of these cases, receive any convictions with this complete lack of evidence? I think the answer lies in what Detective Davis told Michelle Malkin in her documentary. She says, when you have one victim, I believed her. Well, we didn't always get things done when you have one victim. But when you have 13, and when the MO is the same, and the verbiage is the same, it just becomes a little more believable. Now, the MO and the verbiage and all that stuff wasn't the same, and we could walk by each case piece by piece to find that out. But to me, it's very telling that their strategy was that in the absence of evidence, they relied on an abundance of accusation. They threw so much spaghetti against the wall to see what would stick. And unfortunately, as the one juror who was interviewed later said, that there were so many people coming up and accusing Daniel of the same thing that they just couldn't believe that they were making all of it up. Like I said, I've been a police officer for 12 years. I've been an investigator. Every time I look into this case, I can't come out with the same conclusion. That Daniel was railroaded, that there is no evidence to support any claims that he committed any of these crimes or even had consensual sexual activity with any of these accusers. And to me, it's a case that is fabricated by biased and corrupt detectives and where cowardly police leadership, cowardly fraternal order of police just turned their backs to Daniel because they wanted to placate the mob and not have to deal with the consequences that would come if they didn't convict him. As I look at the case, I think, what has happened over the last 10 years of my life, I've had some really fulfilling things happen in my career, positions that I've had an opportunity to serve in, some great people that I've had an opportunity to work with, and it's really been amazing. And I think how Daniel, who had many goals on the department of things that he wanted to accomplish, will never have that opportunity. But more importantly, in that 10-year period, my wife and I have had 3 children. I've got 2. Daniel, as you can see in the picture behind me, he was a college football player, high school football player. I've had an opportunity to coach my son playing football, watch him play football. I've had an opportunity to watch my kids dance in choir performances. Got to go to my brother's wedding. Got to see nieces and nephews. I get to see my wife and my children every day. I get to enjoy taking a breath as a free man every single day. It's something that was taken away from Daniel. And as a police officer, to me, I take that very seriously, taking away somebody's freedom. And I don't think it's something that any of us should take lightly. And recognize that this could happen to every single one of us. That's why I'm speaking out.
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm going to pass this over to investigative journalist and author Michelle Malkin.
Thank you very much. I want to thank each and every one of the supporters behind here who was brave enough to stand. And yes, it's a little cold. Thank you. I haven't gotten a chance to say hi and thank you to all of you, but it's been a long journey. And you were at this far before I came in, and my husband, we flew in here, by the way, from Florida. So we're going to get a little bit funny back there. But this is extraordinary. And my name is Michelle Malkin. I'm an investigative journalist. I worked in journalism for 30 years in print, broadcast, radio, documentaries, and probably the most important work I've ever done is in the field of wrongful convictions. And it was 8 years ago, around this time, that my production company at the time put up a billboard, I think it was I-44 and Kelly Avenue, and it had a photo of Daniel in his orange prison jumpsuit, and then another photo of him in his suit in the courtroom on this day 10 years ago when he learned his fate. And the billboard had a very simple question on it. And the billboard said, what if he didn't do it? That's all. The billboard was there for less than a day, and it was taken down at the behest of a single lone agitator. Just one. And every single news outlet in this city covered the so-called outrage and quoted the same lone single agitator. It was a little bit like, where's Waldo? Oh, there she is, there she is, there she is. And based on this lone protester's complaint, the phrase, what if he didn't do it, was treated as terroristic. That's what she said it was. That First Amendment protected speech amounted to terror. And the irony is that we gave this lone agitator space in our documentary to give her opinion and her reasoning for why she opposed Daniel Holtzclaw's bid for innocence. Why she was one of those agitators who stood outside the courtroom and was in front of all your cameras. And she told us that if the right verdict hadn't been delivered, she couldn't guarantee, this was her words, she couldn't guarantee that something wouldn't happen in this city. It's clear that there was political, ideological, community blackmail that helped precipitate a wrongful conviction. But it was just one factor. And this phrase, what if he didn't do it, has echoed across decades in this state. Daniel is not alone. You've heard from J.J. Humphrey. You've heard from people left, right, and center who've been involved in the same kind of lifelong battles to clear their loved ones' names, to get them out of prison and to make it right. Every one of the law enforcement officers that's standing here understands the importance of pattern recognition, patterns of misconduct, patterns of evidence suppression, patterns of evidence destruction. And there's a reason why we're standing in front of this judicial center. I joke that it is the Oklahoma Judicial Chamber of Secrets. Unfortunately, it's not like a nice Harry Potter movie. It is a horror story for every one of the people who are fighting to dislodge the secrets there. And I have to step out of frame for a minute. In the performing arts, there's this phrase called breaking the fourth wall. I've had many not pleasant words for the local media here, but I will have to say that the local media has played an instrumental role, to the extent that they played any role at all, in dislodging secrets that would have never come to light, involving the secret hearings that happened here in June 2017, that were brazenly unconstitutional and illegal, and an affront to justice. I'm the child of immigrants. My parents believed in the American way, and for the last 10 years in covering
covering Daniel's case and many other cases. Cases that you'll never know, names that you will never see, because many of these families do not have this kind of support system. They don't have connections in the media. And it is really hard to wake up in the morning and be proud of a country that allows these wrongful prosecutions to happen, the misconduct at every level. And I'm not just talking about biased or incompetent detectives like the ones I interviewed. By the way, that was the last interview that Jim Davis and Rocky Gregory ever allowed. Shut down after that, but you can still see the whole thing on YouTube. It's not just them. It's not just their supervisors. It's not just district attorneys whose main goal is to get elected and seal finality for every conviction at all costs. It's also the judiciary. They are responsible. They are responsible. They're the ones who are supposed to hold justice in their hand. Justice for all. And yet, look at this. Look at these pages. Every single citizen should know that this is what happens in the justice system. Blacked out. Deep-sixed. Buried. Black pages. What is it that this court and those prosecutors and those detectives and the crime lab don't want citizens to know? You know what they don't want to know? That there's unfinished business that stretches back 3 decades. The forensic analyst in this case, Elaine Taylor, worked alongside Joyce Gilchrist. They may not have liked each other very much, but Elaine Taylor did what Joyce Gilchrist told her to do. And Elaine Taylor told one of Daniel's lawyers, his civil attorney, the renowned exoneration specialist Kathleen Zellner, in a sworn civil deposition, that yes, not only did she witness, but she participated in taking boxes, cardboard boxes of evidence that held the lives and deaths and freedom or imprisonment of citizens in this country, and took it down to a big old hole. That's a quote. There's a video of it. It will be on the website. Took it down to a big old hole and burned the evidence and dumped it into a pit down by the river. Hollywood can't make this up. We can scream at the top of our lungs, but the fact is that people won't care if it's not them. The protesters wanted to make this thing about race. This is not a black man. There is a black man, however, who was, I believe, wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted by the same team that was involved in Daniel's case. His name is Rayshon Mullins. And guess what? After he was convicted in the same manner and cast falsely, I believe, as a serial rapist 3 times, starting in 2009, when this state, which was the last in the country, by the way, to pass post-conviction DNA testing, asked, please, can I get my evidence retested? Was told, decades after his conviction, that the vast majority of evidence in his case had been destroyed. He does not have representation. Nobody cares about him. Astonishing. If it weren't for Daniel, I wouldn't know about a man named Bobby Russell. He is standing here today. He was a proud Oklahoma City police officer. He was falsely accused of rape during a late-night traffic stop, not unlike Daniel's. Are we detecting patterns here yet, my friends? Pattern recognition. And then at this late-night stop, a young woman falsely accused him of rape, and there's no speculation about it because it's on video. Unlike Daniel, who at the time in 2014 did not have body cameras because the department didn't have them, thank God, literally, that Bobby Russell did. And thank God that he turned it on. Because you can see that in less than 3 minutes, he's right there. This is Bobby Russell, folks. Meet him. Please meet him. Public, please meet him. Thank you for standing up. After 3 minutes, law enforcement. No, you exercise discretion. That's community policing. And his reward for letting this woman go, who had blown through these stop signs and stoplights in Bricktown, was to turn around and march back into police headquarters and have the audacity to accuse him of something that didn't happen on the camera. And only after a couple of hours of investigating by the detective who finally saw the body cam did she admit that, yeah, nothing happened and it's all good. And she walked out of the police headquarters. Women lie about sexual assault and rape, and it happens more than police departments or anyone else would care to admit to you. Although Kim Davis did tell me, quite chirpily, in my interview with her, that yes, it happens. It's common. And it is an affront not only to the innocent who were accused, but real rape victims, of which there are plenty of, and which the police department should be spending their time investigating and putting their rapists in prison. If it weren't for Daniel Holtzclaw, and by the way, I'll be doing a podcast, a series called Corruptahoma, and I'll be talking about Bobby Russell's case. And I hope that everyone here who cares about wrongful convictions, and particularly wrongful rape allegations, will help Bobby, because like so many others, he's facing a wall of obstruction when it comes to public records requests. And here again, I will break that fourth wall and address the media, because it is your ability to use what influence you have and position you have as important protectors of the First Amendment and every other amendment, that you use the Open Records Act to bust open these secrets. AG Drummond has announced that he is a champion of transparency, and yet here in Oklahoma County and Oklahoma City in particular, there are many, many innocent people and wrongly accused people who cannot get answers on their basic Open Records Act requests. If it weren't for Daniel, I wouldn't know another police officer who was also railroaded. And it was a true conspiracy. I'm not just rattling a tinfoil hat. The media has talked about him. His name is D.G. Brewer. The police and prosecutors conspired to manufacture false domestic violence charges against this man. And it was female detectives who were friends with the ex-wife who made these false allegations that tried to railroad him. But he fought back. And he won. And he saved his career. And more people need to do that. But when Daniel's case came to light, people would say, hey, why would a police department do that to its own police officers? Good question. There's any number of reasons why people lie about false allegations, and there's any number of reasons why police departments would do this to their own. I can't answer that. Those would be good questions to ask a police department. If it weren't for Daniel Holtzclaw, I wouldn't have had the privilege of knowing a man named Byron Bo Boschel. He was a captain who served as the civilian crime lab supervisor during the Gilchrist Macy era. And I became friends with him in his late years when he was dying of brain cancer. And he entrusted with me many stories about what it took to unearth the scandal that was systemic, the evidence suppression, the evidence mishandling, the evidence fabrication. That is unfinished business. And it's the reason why we're all standing here today, is because there was no accountability, as JJ said, for what happened during those years. And all of those babies that were spawned in the prosecutor's office also were spawned in the crime lab as well. And when you wonder why, after a quarter century of Elaine Taylor doing the things that she was doing, and whatever secrets are hiding here, it's no wonder that there's a recipe of wrongful conviction after wrongful conviction after wrongful conviction. And it's got to end. I'm holding in my hand a flash drive that was given to me by the family of Byron Boschel. And it contains internal memos, and it contains other crucial documents that show finally how it was that Gilchrist and Macy got away with what they got away with, and who was responsible, and naming names. Byron Boschel in his last days was able to complete at least 50,000 words of a manuscript of his memoir, and I intend in my podcast to read it and make it known and public and shine a light that hasn't been shown in the dark corners of corrupt Oklahoma. We're here for Daniel, and I have crossed that line. I admit it. When I started working on his case, I thought he was guilty. I saw everybody sneering at him. The video of people mockingly singing happy birthday to him and dancing on what they thought was his grave. But I think these people never anticipated that such a wide, broad coalition of people from all backgrounds would gather together, black and white and brown. In corrupt Oklahoma, there's no Republican, there's no Democrat, there's just corruptocrats. And it's going to take people across party lines and across socioeconomic status and across racial lines and ethnic lines in order to secure the change that we need. My husband and I and our family pledged 8 years ago, we started on this journey, that we wouldn't stop until Daniel was free. And I echo Jenny's vow as well. I've started a new phase of my life at midlife after 30 years of journalism to do this kind of work pro bono and help as many people as possible who are in Daniel's situation. As a parent, I cannot imagine the pain every day of knowing that your child is locked up in a cage for crimes he didn't commit. And I honor Daniel's parents, Eric and Kamiko, and I welcome Eric to the mic. Thank you.
I'll be the last one, I promise. But again, I want to thank everybody, all these supporters. I see people from my hometown of Enid here. I see people all the way from Texas, Florida, across the United States helping us, and we really appreciate it. I'm glad to speak for my son today, but now I can finally speak openly as a retired police officer advocating for justice for the wrongfully convicted. I'm no longer worried, like many active police officers were that I've talked to, of losing my job or for speaking out against this kind of injustice. I joined my daughter and these fine folks speaking out against bad, biased police, investigations, corruption, and false political correctness. This is something that has to stop. You know, there's nothing my wife and I, Kumiko, and I want more than to see our son hug him and wish him a happy 39th birthday. Watch him blow out those candles on his mom's homemade German chocolate cake. And that's the only gift we wanted today. But 10 years ago, that privilege was taken away from us. As the national media spotlight intensified on this case involving white officers and black citizens, Oklahoma officials chose a path of political convenience. They sacrificed one officer, our son, to protect the careers, property, and the public image of their institution. As a retired military veteran and a retired law enforcement officer of 27 years, what sickens me most is knowing how many officers participated in this fraud. Through open records requests and discovery depositions from the civil rights lawsuit, we understand far more of what happened behind the scenes.
It's disgusting. We've been told repeatedly by our attorneys that some judges stop listening the moment they hear the word conspiracy involves more than 3 people. That mindset is exactly how corruption takes root. It gives permission to investigators and prosecutors to fabricate cases against citizens, using our case, the blueprint of the state of Oklahoma versus Daniel Holtzclaw, with no regard for the lives that destroyed along the way. Let me be clear. Our son is 100% innocent of every charge against him. Daniel followed me into police service because he believed in honor. He was raised to respect his elders, respect women, respect people of all backgrounds, and respect the law. And I swear to you, if Daniel had done any of these accusations, it would not be it would be indefensible. Justice would have already been served. We would have walked away. I understand people want to gather here and demand justice, and we appreciate that. That's exactly what we are doing here today. But I don't understand a few things. I don't understand where one-size-fits-all approach that insists every allegation of sexual assault must be accepted without question. That mindset leaves no room for false accusations. That's the mindset that the investigators in this case had. They just accepted everything they said. Are we really saying no one lies? That's not justice. True victims deserve a fair and thorough process. So do the accused. 10 years later, the memories from that courtroom still haunt us. Several of our speakers have talked about it. The shouting from the outside was so loud, it stopped the witness testimony. Protesters photographed the jurors, confronted people in the elevators and the bathrooms, and chanted, "Give him life," long before they understood any of the facts. Former DA David Prater weaponization of the media fueled this mob mentality and spread misinformation that poisoned the entire process.
Yes.
And the judge, we've already heard about Judge Henderson, he allowed it. He told the jury to ignore the chaos outside instead of controlling his own courtroom. Later, of course, Henderson was exposed for having sexual relationships with the district attorneys, the assistant district attorneys, including those in the sex crime unit. Yet he's the one who was allowed to preside over a 2-day secret hearing related to key forensic issues in Daniel's case. He banned Daniel's attorney while every government official involved was allowed in. And afterward, he simply declared nothing happened that Daniel needed to know about. Daniel's post-conviction DNA expert is keeping pretty busy right now, after finally being able to see the sealed material. Unlike Henderson, Daniel's expert actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to forensic science. He's the one who wrote the direct appeal affidavit that prompted the secret hearings in the first place. This is crazy. Evidence related to those secret documents that we used to defend Daniel must be filed under seal, hidden from the public that pays these official salaries. It just doesn't make sense why it has to be all hidden. How many other cases did Timothy Henderson compromise? Where was the transparency? Again, how can a man engaged in his own misconduct send a judgment of our son? Daniel's entire life showed discipline, hard work, and integrity, from his first job up in Enid at McDonald's to his stellar football accomplishments on the field and on to the Oklahoma City Police Department, where he was praised by supervisors and was on track to join the gang unit before these accusations came out. When the detectives dug into Daniel's past, they found nothing, and they dug. Not from the neighbors, not from the coworkers or classmates. They found nothing. They looked everywhere in this past, but there was nothing. Nothing to try to tie him into a serial rapist that they tried to make that image in. And they just went on. They think he snapped. It's just crazy. So instead, they built the case by recruiting women with long criminal histories and telling the public that Daniel targeted marginalized women because no one would believe them. They searched his patrol logs, the information sheets, and his records, and contacted women solely to add them to the case that he was involved with. By what means we may never know. These biased detectives sought out many accusers to make their racial bias case stronger because the jurors might not believe one, but if they are many, then something will likely stick. One woman even accused Daniel after he saved her life when she swallowed a vial of PCP. It's just crazy. It sounds like a Hollywood script, but it became our reality and Daniel's nightmare. Now I want to share something that we haven't shared before publicly with all of you. From 2016 until February 24, Daniel was in the protective custody in Colorado, living under an alias for his protection. DOC set him up to be out of state for his protection, they said. A few times his identity was exposed when TV shows were shown over the prison TV channels that aired his case in particular. But there were no serious threats and no violence. He worked hard to mentor other inmates. He took pride in holding a trustee job, and he prepared to take college classes. Life was difficult, but Colorado treated him like a human being. Now that changed abruptly in February of 2024. Without warning, Daniel was pulled from a cell, shackled, and flown by U.S. Marshals to another state prison out of Colorado, one notorious for human rights. Because of the interstate combat transfer, everything was done in secrecy. We still don't know who authorized it, and they refused to give us answers to our questions of why he was treated that way. We think it was a direct on our attack on us, our family, for trying to bring his case to the light of the nation. His personal property disappeared. His alias was removed, exposing him as a danger as a prior police officer. He was falsely labeled as a violent offender. He was thrown in solitary confinement with several mentally ill inmates, some who screamed all through the night. He lost 40 pounds when that transfer happened. It was just mind-boggling what the punishment they were inflicting on him. We have not been able to see him yet because it takes longer. We can no longer make that drive in a single day, and so we haven't been able to visit. When we do, it will likely be a no-contact visit behind plexiglass or in a cage. We're told that he cannot stand, drink water, or even use the restroom during the 3-hour visit time that they allowed him to have visits. Even though he said he would love to have visitors, Daniel has discouraged us to visit because of the terrible conditions. It certainly feels like retaliation. Retaliation for our family speaking out, the exercise of our First Amendment rights, and for fighting to expose wrongful convictions in Oklahoma. And if this state can do this to Daniel, they can do it to any son or daughter. Our birthday wish for Daniel is simple. Oklahoma expose the lies, end the secrecy, restore his freedom, and hold every responsible person accountable. Everybody, thank you so much. And on behalf of Kamiko and myself, I want to express our thanks to our attorney, Ben Munda, our advocates, our volunteers here today, the exonerees, the experts, the researchers, and every reporter here who has taken the time to look beyond the headlines and discover the truth about Daniel. Thank you for standing with us for justice, for transparency, and thank you for standing with our son. That's going to conclude our press conference today. And again, we really thank you so much for us.
I am Jenny Holtzclaw, Daniel's mother. I just want to say thank you for your support. Thank you!
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll be able to talk after this and to our supporters. If you would hang tonight, we'd like to talk to you. Thank you all also. Thank you very much.
I would probably say so, yeah. Jenny, are you good with me stopping?